Bennett, one of the great privileges of being in the rabbinate is to have the opportunity to work with people like Joe and many of the people that you've met in the course of your relatively, so far, brief time here at Bethel, and in your experience over the last number of years as you sort of becoming a professional Jew, and looked at in that kind of way, seen in that kind of way. So first question, and people are always interested, and you'll probably find as you go through your career, people will ask you this question more than any other. What is it that drew you into the rabbinate? And maybe you could share that with us a little bit this morning.
That could be the only question you
That could
ask.
be the only question.
Really, I can take that one for long enough. I think I grew up with lots of people at shul, at Kiddush, being like, you should become a rabbi, which really disincentivized me from becoming a rabbi.
Right.
I loved Judaism and cared about Judaism in a really deep way from a really young age.
And you grew up where?
Thank you for asking. I grew up mostly in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I actually don't think that's a good reason to become a rabbi. I think like lay leadership who love Judaism is so important for Jewish communities. If we're kind of exporting all of the love of Judaism to rabbis, that's not good. But I also really fell in love with teaching Judaism and learning Judaism in a way that I think rabbis can in a really particular way. And so there were many, many years of me checking in with myself to make sure that the reason why I was becoming a rabbi was not because I wanted to spend 5 years learning about Judaism, but because I wanted to spend a lifetime sharing and teaching Judaism. So I think those two things are really different. And a few years ago, that was like, kind of finally came to the decision that was really what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah, was there a moment, do you remember a moment where you said, okay, this is my path now, this is my path moving forward?
It's interesting. I don't know if I can think of a specific moment, but I think in the process of I actually started applying to rabbinical school before I was certain. I was applying to rabbinical, I wanted to be a rabbi, and the process of doing the application and answering the questions on the application was just like, it felt so natural that I felt like, yes, this is what I want to be doing. If you're excited about filling out an application, which you almost never are, then that might be the thing that you should really be doing.
Yeah, there's a whole sermon in that, I think, actually.
Yeah.
As one who really dislikes filling out any kind of application or form or anything like that. What's doing at JTS these days? Are you focusing on a specific area in your studies or just general JTS?
So the first 2 years are kind of standard classes that everyone takes. So there's two session blocks every week for Talmud and two session blocks for halakha. And then there's a Hebrew requirement and all of those things that kind of are standard classes. But within those, there's a lot of room for students to kind of personalize the experience. Right. So I'm taking my classes, and that's great. But I also have the honor and joy to be able to supplement with other chavrutot of my friends, my colleagues, I guess, I don't know, and build those relationships over learning text in a way that I feel really blessed to be in a space where everyone is really motivated. That's what they want to be doing.
And are you more like a Talmud guy, Midrash guy? I
majored in Talmud in undergrad. The JTS also has an undergraduate program called the Joint Program, where one gets a degree from JTS in a field of Jewish study and a field from Columbia in a field of secular study. So I majored in Talmud and political science. I walked in on my first semester at JTS as an undergraduate student to a Talmud class where I had objectively the worst teacher of Talmud that I had my entire time at JTS and fell in love. And that has sustained me. And so, yeah, I'm a big Talmud guy.
The teacher will remain nameless.
The teacher will certainly remain nameless.
I understand. So tell us a little bit about, your group of students. It's an incredibly challenging time in the Jewish world. Certainly when I was in rabbinical school, which was already a long time ago, and when Rabbi Saroken was there, we had nothing on the horizon, nothing happening in the world in the same way that you have it as a rabbinical student today. And you and your classmates, what are you talking about in terms of challenges that you feel that you're facing?
Yeah. I took a class this semester that has been one of the best classes that I've ever taken at JTS, undergrad and as a rabbinical
You can
student.
tell us this teacher's name.
This I can't. His name is Daniel Yang.
Okay.
He is not Jewish. He is a chaplain at at Columbia Presbyterian. It's a class on pastoral care. And let me back up a second. It's not required that JTS students do internships until their fourth year. Everyone does internships before their fourth year, both to make money and because it's an incredible opportunity to see Jews out in the world. And while you don't take CPE, clinical pastoral education, which is an internship that you do over one of the summers until later in the program, you're doing pastoral care from the moment you walk into your first internship. That's just the job. So I had the honor of being a rabbinical intern on a campus at Brandeis during fall of 2023.
I'm a Brandeis graduate.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My husband
Yeah.
is a Brandeis graduate. My sister is also a Brandeis graduate. Big Brandeis roots.
And where's Rafi's a Brandeis graduate as well. Roll dice, roll, go Judges. That was they changed that. But so anyway, sorry.
Bang those gavels.
Yeah.
And that was an incredibly tumultuous time to be a student. And I had this opportunity to conduct these one-on-ones with students where we talked about whatever they wanted to be talking about. And sometimes that was about Israel, and sometimes it wasn't. And sometimes it was a left-wing perspective, and sometimes it was a right-wing perspective. And my job wasn't really to convince them of any one perspective. My job was to hear them and to hold all of the things that they were feeling and thinking. And that was a I actually loved that experience. I think my husband would have hated that experience because you really have to package up all of your feelings, put them in a little box, close the drawer,
Right.
and then sit in front of the person. That was actually so healing and wonderful for me after October 7th. And this class
What about it was healing?
I think I was feeling lots of different things and lots of different cognitive dissonance and pain and all of those things. And that was taking up a lot of my energy. And it was actually really lovely to be able to walk into a moment, one of the only moments, it felt like, where all of those things that I was feeling weren't actually important.
Uh-huh.
And I could step into a moment where I wasn't the priority and what I was feeling actually didn't matter. And what mattered was the other person and caring for them. It felt like a real honor and a real joy. That was tremendous. And also, I encountered some really difficult situations where students expressed political views that were truly an anathema to everything that I believe, and also to take on the things that they were saying and to hold them and to do the same care that I was giving them. There's one particular moment where that happened that has stayed with me for months, years afterwards. And this class that I opened with has been really special because we've brought the experiences that we've had doing pastoral care in the field to this class and processed them together in addition to the curriculum. And I brought this example from a year before into this class and was able to unpack it, piece it apart, pick through each of the different questions that I asked, pieces of the interaction, and that was like really tremendous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you, in that role, you were validating, and also bearing. Sometimes all someone needs is for someone else to say, "I see you." Right?
Yeah.
See you, and that's what you were doing. And your description of the rabbinate, I think, probably resonated with Rabbi Saroken, and I can tell you resonated with me. The sense of feeling this honor and this privilege and this joy that you get from being able to serve this community. It's very, you can see I'm getting verklempt, right?
Yeah.
It's a very powerful thing. So I'm going to bring Rabbi Saroken up for just a second. We're getting a little tight time-wise. And here's a question for you.
Sure.
We're not going to go into the parsha per se, but let's say you have one important sermon to give, and the date is randomly assigned to you. So what's the parsha, or what place in the Torah do you not want to be? In other words, what's the part of the Torah you do not want to have to preach that sermon about? And then what's the part of the Torah you do want to preach that sermon about?
Okay, I'll get to the one that I don't want to preach about second, because I really have to think about that.
Yeah.
The one that I do, actually, just because it's playing in my head, the Sephardi Haftarah for this week's Parsha is maybe my favorite chapter of Tanakh.
Okay.
It's tremendous. It's from Hosea, which is my favorite book of Tanakh. And Hosea contains some of the most virulent, vicious anger that God has towards the Jewish people in all of the Tanakh. And then you get to chapter 11, and God says, like, how can I give you up, Ephraim? Like, I can't let go. And all of my tenderness is stirred up in me. And then God says something incredible. Then Hosea says something incredible. He says, I want to give you up, but I can't, because I have to forgive you. Ki el anochi velo ish, because I am God and not a person. And there is only one other time in the entirety of Tanakh where the phrase Ki el anochi velo ish shows up, and it's in Numbers to mean the opposite thing. In Numbers, it means I am a God who deals justly. I never change my mind. And Hosea comes and says, that's so not it. You've got that so wrong. What it means to have a relationship with God is that God has an infinite capacity for love and forgiveness, so much so that you don't even understand what I'm talking about. I think that is like such a powerful critique of how we sometimes think about God and our relationship to God that we need more deeply in our Judaism. So that would be one of the things that I would totally talk about.
I think you just preached that sermon beautifully, standing on one foot.
The one that I wouldn't want to talk about, my least favorite parsha in the entire Torah is Kitetse, because it has...
That's her favorite parsha.
I'm so sorry. It
Right?
just has...
I do like it, yeah.
It just has all of like the worst parts of the Torah that are so hard to handle. So much like sexual violence, so much justification for genocide, all of these things that are really horrible. And I feel like the joke that I make is like every year you know that Kitetse and Kitavo are hard parshas because you get the same sermon every year, which is fruit trees, don't chop them down. And I think that parsha I would that parsha, particularly when I'm working with B'nai Mitzvah students, that is really hard.
Tough. That's tough. Great. Okay. Rabbi Saroken, al regel echat.
All right, you do yours first. I'm thinking of my least favorite.
You're thinking of your least favorite?
Yeah.
So for me, my favorite would probably be Bo, Parshat Bo. I love that. It was my senior sermon at JTS.
Huh.
So it's always
Yeah.
resonated for me. And the sense of Pesach and the plagues and all of the business in Parshat Bo. But to me, it's also very much about Lador Vador, from one generation to the next, and the responsibility we have to. So my favorite would be Bo. My least favorite would be Bo. the same parsha, because I've found over the years, and I'd be interested to hear Rabbi Saroken with, I found over the years that the more deeply invested you get in something, the harder it becomes to talk about it in some ways. So it's a positive and a negative for me.
That's really
Rabbi
interesting.
Saroken?
So I'm actually going to say that I think Kitetse was your daughter's bat mitzvah portion.
It was. Meiravi.
Yeah,
Yes, I think it was.
yeah.
Oh, no, I think she was Mishpatim, actually.
Oh, right. Also laws.
Yeah.
So I'm going to respond. It
Yeah.
probably isn't my favorite, but I will say that, that I do appreciate that there are so many laws that I think in some ways sort of help us or guide us to live ethical lives in Kitetse. It's not my favorite because I feel like it's hard. There are so many laws. It's also like Mishpatim. That, and without narrative, it's like it's less juicy than, Bereshit and on so many others. But I do think that when I sit down with a bar mitzvah student with Kitetse, they actually have a different understanding of how Judaism can guide them through the complicated pieces of life, which I think is an important thing for people to see, that it's not all the stories that we read this week and, in throughout Genesis and some of the stories in Exodus and some of the stories in, Numbers and Deuteronomy, that there's actually real law that comes from the Torah. So I do appreciate that. I would say sorry. Genesis is, I feel like it's so familiar. And there are so many ways to make it meaningful and relevant in people's lives. It's also like watching a family develop, and you can see so clearly the mistakes that they're making along the way and the challenges that are arising, and you sort of want to be like, no, stop, but you can't stop it. And then you sort of think like how many blind spots we all have in our lives, that if someone were watching from the outside, they too would look at our lives and be like, no, don't do that, Right. So it's sort of just a fun and lovely book to preach on. And I don't know if I have a least favorite. No. Oh, yes, I do, actually. I'm going to go with your theme, actually. I don't love the plague narratives. I don't know why I don't. I just, whenever it comes to the plague narratives, I always, in my body, feel a little bit of like, I'm not sure what it is. I need to think about that today, but that's like my visceral reaction to the beginning of those, plague stories.
So you can work that out in your sermon the next time.
I can do it. I can do that. Yeah.
Parshayot.
Yeah,
You could
why
do
I
that.
don't like this. Yeah.
All right. Well, we so appreciate you indulging us for a few minutes to get to know Joe better and to get to know Bennett better. Very much appreciate Bennett's presence here this weekend. Reminder that he will be teaching a shiur, a brief class towards the end of Kiddush, so we hope you'll be able to stay for that as well.